was in Amja conference, and it's a fortune, alhamdulillah, to have him here in our community. So knowledgeable in both Islamic and also psychological perspective, alhamdulillah. So today, inshallah, he's gonna share with us, and Jazakallah khair. It's really a privilege to have you here, Dr. Mahmood. Allah bless you, and thanks for coming to us tonight. Jazakallahu khairan. So we put on our file that navigating the social media and how to use the because like one of the main problem that I'm facing here as an imam, many people they come that they are impacted by what they are seeing, but there's videos and then images, and some of them they are into depressed, some of them subhanallah because of the depression, even we don't see them in masjid anymore. He can't walk. He said, I'm so stressed out, subhanallah, because of the feeling of being helpless and all of that. Inshallah, Dr. Mahmoud today, he will help us how to navigate this in positive perspective, inshallah. Jazakallahu khairan. Bismillah.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم صل وسلم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد. نويت التعلم والتعليم والنفع والانتفاع. قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم: الراحمون يرحمهم الرحمن ارحموا من في الأرض يرحمكم من في السماء. I'm honored to be here with you all. It's nice to see such a gathering, mashallah, on a Friday night, mashallah. The topic of how do we navigate the social media, it has a lot to do with our own strategies. How do I interact with the world? How do I view the world? How do you take information and put it into your brain, into your heart? And so a lot of us, what happens in the social media, whether it could be YouTube, could be Instagram, could be Facebook, anything that you see online, is that many of us are getting our information from these sources. And this becomes all that you learn from, or this becomes the majority of what we get exposed to. And it's very, if you look at the images itself, the human brain is attracted to image and video. These things are, it grasps you right away. It grabs your attention so that you start focusing on these images, these videos. And we find this, in all levels of our age range, even children, teenagers, adults, everybody. The content might differ from age to age, but the concept is still there, that this information, the things that we see on our screens, it's very enticing. It's meant to be that way. It's meant to be something that is to you, something that you can't stop looking at. And if you notice, people, they can track your own time, how much time you stay online, and you'll notice that we spend a lot of time, mostly in waste, in a wasting way of our time, but we end up using a lot of our time on these devices. And it could be on your phone, could be on your iPad, your computer, on your TV, your computer screens. All of these things we're getting inundated with it. And it's not the normal way that a human would interact. If we think 100 years ago, even 50 years ago, 20 years ago, this type of level of technology is unprecedented. It's never happened before. So when we think about our sources of knowledge, as Muslims, we do have this idea that, we want to verify and make sure that we're consuming beneficial knowledge that we receive from our scholars, from our history, from our vast areas of knowledge in the Muslim world in general, and that is usually built on an idea that you have what we call an isnad, that you have a chain of transmission, that you learned your knowledge from your teacher, and your teacher learned from his teacher or her teacher, and so forth and so forth until you get to the source of that knowledge. And obviously, for Muslims, the greatest source of knowledge for us was the most knowledgeable of all of us, and the most perfect was our beloved Prophet Muhammad. So his knowledge, his teachings, his way, his lifestyle, all of that is something that we would hope is transferred to his community, the Sahaba, and then it goes to the Tabi'een and Tabi'een and so forth until it comes to our time now. And we verify this by this chain of transmission, this isnad, so that we learn from our scholars because they learned it from their scholars and so forth until you can tie that all to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This knowledge base of transferring knowledge it's in all sciences, by the way. It's not just in the deen, in ulum ad-din, and of course it comes to our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But there are other types, any career that you're in, any knowledge that you're in, any field you're in, you're going to find out there's going to be a chain of transmission to the most well-known experts. So even in my field, in psychology and neuroscience, I learned from a professor, one of my professors, who's a neuroscientist. He did a lot of psychobiological studies, and my professor, he learned from his professor, and there's a whole lineage, and it goes to about 4 generations, and then amongst that was a professor named Wilhelm Wundt. He was the first psychological lab that established in the modern time, and so I have an isnad there as well, just from my academic knowledge. You can learn it in any field, in any type of realm you're in, even in arts and other abilities. So in the field of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, for example, you also have an isnad. You have where did you learn your grappling skills from? Usually it would come from a black belt. And that black belt, he got his certification from another black belt who goes back, and it traces back to a man named Maeda, the first Japanese judoka expert who brought that to Brazilian, and that became the start of that particular fighting art. So these knowledge, these skills are all things that we can connect in source to a legitimate, resource. And the most legitimate of all resources is our beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He taught us everything that we know. Even the Quran came by his tongue. So even then, all of this knowledge, we have to attribute it to him sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The difficulty in social media, though, of course, is we don't always know where the source is. It's somebody just giving you a quote on a video or on a TikTok and saying, here, I'm going to give you some knowledge, or here's some advice. And you don't know where's that coming from. And I can't tell you how many times my kids, they will come to me and they'll say they saw a video on YouTube, and they'll say, oh, Baba, I've heard that this is haram to do this, or this is, this is something that the Muslims don't do. And I was like, where did you get this from? And turns out it came out from some, video who we don't know, verify where this person's teacher was, where did they get this knowledge from. But he has a lot of subscribers online, So a lot of times our most loudest voices that you see in social media are not necessarily the scholars with all the qualifications. It's just people that have maybe the most loudest presentation, that maybe they have good, videography, or maybe they just have a lot of followings and, followers in general because of popularity. So that becomes the resource, that becomes the legitimate source in most people's eyes, unfortunately. And this is something that becomes, you can tie this to everything, all of our social interactions. When we look at things, what people post is something to always be aware of when you are faced with knowledge and you're trying to verify it. Now, of course, I'm saying all this in a way, I'm starting out my talk talking about a lot of the dangers of screen time and being, engaged with social media and all of these apps and programs. And I definitely have a bias, which is I do feel that we consume it too much. Even myself, I admit it. We use it too much, and that becomes like anytime you're sitting and there's some time you have to wait for you're waiting for at a appointment for a doctor. You're sitting in the waiting room. What are you going to do? You're going to go on your screen and you just wait and you'll flip and you'll look on different things, and that becomes our way to preoccupy ourselves in that moment, even though our teachers tell us that it would be much more beneficial for you in this life and the next life to engage maybe in dhikr, remembrance of Allah, do some du'as, recite some Quran if you can, or just any dhikr in general, or just ponder things, reflect in this world. Most of us, we don't have this ability to just sit and reflect anymore, because we're just engaged in our electronic devices. It's actually something that we have to kind of encourage our young people just to sit and reflect and be bored for a little bit. Nobody wants to be bored, so they will quickly go to their device and do something. But if you just can be bored for a little bit, pause, put your stuff away, and just ponder, think about things. The tafakkur is that reflection is another way in which you can connect to Allah and get closer to, what it is to be a Muslim. So I'm saying all this in a sort of negative way initially, because I do have a bias. I think we overuse it. Now, aside, of course, there is benefits for the technology. No doubt. We can't just say that it's all bad. Of course, there's beneficial things. You learn about what's happening, for example, in the world right now. And most of us, when we're looking in the social media, we're probably looking in these days on our brothers and sisters in Gaza. We're trying to find out what's the latest news. And so the device becomes useful in that moment, because you can connect with the ummah in general. And so, of course, these kind of things, you can then, if you have more awareness, then people can make dua about them. They can donate for charity. They can do any kind of things that might be proactive to help the situation. And this is not just in Palestine, but in many situations that are happening all around the world. So there is a benefit, and we can recognize that. The question is, are we using it in a beneficial way, like as much as we could? Are we maximizing that? When you start looking at these images, a lot of people report to me that they'll say, I start looking at these images and I can't stop. I'll go to the next video and the next one. And sometimes I'll even say the same video several times. The same video, it's so sad and it's heart-wrenching, so I want to watch it again and again and again. And it becomes then, is this beneficial for you? I understand the first or second time, but once you start multiplying and just watching these videos over and over, what is it happening to you psychologically? And is it benefiting, you know? That's the question. And we're tying this to the idea, of course, as I said in the beginning, the imagery also is addictive. You know, it does connect to your brain and you can't stop. You keep going with it. And then they'll refer you to another video, and that will take you to another video. And next thing you know, like, you know, 20 minutes later, you're like, what was the original video that I was even looking at? I don't even remember it anymore. And I've gone through so many other ones in that time. So in those moments, my recommendation is that we try to be what we call intentional, you know, have a good niyyah, you know, before you engage in it, figure out, why am I doing this? Why am I watching this? What is my purpose and the goal? And maybe if I'm gonna use it to share it, am I doing it because I want to spread awareness? That could be a good intention. But check myself. Am I doing this because I just want more people to, you know, hear what I'm posting? Is it for my own, you know, increasing my profile so other people see me on social media? You have to think about that too. Always wonder, what is my intention while you're going into these things. So this way, you will help you with your actual interaction with these images or messages or anything that you get into. Some of these too are also just very unhealthy if you start looking at the comments. The comments, I think, are some of the most horrible, you know, things you can see sometimes. There'll be good positive comments, of course, but that's not what your eye, you know, catches right away. As you're scrolling, you will focus on those more negative comments, and some of those comments are just very ignorant. Some might be racist. There may be things that make you incite, you just inside, you start feeling very frustrated and angry. And this is the world that we live now, where you can comment on people's things and you don't have to see them face to face. So you can say almost anything, and you would never say that to a person face to face. But on the comment, you can say these very horrible things and feel that, oh, it's okay. And this is something that we can be guilty of it, of either observing it or even participating in it ourselves. So this is another thing to be aware of in your intentions. All of what we do, we should think about it from the standpoint of, is there a benefit to this? What is it? How can I connect this, to my just positive things in my life? How can I connect this to my spirit? How can I connect this to Allah in general? All of these, if you look at a larger place about it, this world is a fleeting place. And you see in some of these tragic videos how such a reminder it is that this world, it's fleeting, and it's filled with tribulations. And we're all now getting more aware of this, because we're seeing that every day, that this is the dunya. And the most resilient people, when you look at these, especially the people in Palestine, how they're responding to this, in some ways, I feel that maybe Allah has given them a certain maqam, a certain state, because they are basically demonstrating to the world how to be resilient and be connected to Allah, because you don't have anyone else. No one else is supporting you. All the countries have completely turned their back, and they're just watching, you're right? And so the Palestinian people have nothing but Allah right now. And Allah mansur ikhwanana, may Allah give them victory. And who are we're sitting here? What is the lesson that we're taking out of this? First, there's going to be a sense of shame in yourself. You're going to feel like, guilty, like what they call survival guilt. Like, I'm surviving. I have a, I'm living in a place. I have a house. I have, my car. I have, something to eat. And I look at, the brothers and sisters, and suddenly I feel like I'm guilty, like I'm a sort of shame or something. So the first thing when you feel that is, of course, I would rather you have that. That means you have a good heart, you have a soft heart, because your heart is broken when you see these things. If you were so hard in your heart and unable to react, that would be very bad. That would be a bad sign. But it's a good sign if it's causing you to have tears and crying about our brothers and sisters who are suffering. That means your heart is still alive. So at first, all of these images and these tears and feelings, you have to acknowledge it and ask Allah. You praise Allah for this. What a blessing that He's allowed you to still be aware. You're not. There's so many people who are just blind, and the fact that Allah is allowing you to have some awareness, that you're not just blind all the time, that's a good thing. And that means that Allah, he still wants good for you if your heart is still reaching out for these people. So we have to kind of refocus that in your mind, so you don't lose sight about it. Allah is Al-Qadir. He's the one who's in control. And when you realize that you have no control in this world, then you turn it to Allah. I'm going to give all of my matters to Allah. And that's the tawakkul, that I'm going to rely on Him. So as you're going through all of these images and videos, you have to kind of remind yourself about that this is, Allah has a plan. Do you think, you just have to ask yourself sometimes, do you think Allah, He lost control? Never, right? Hasha. Allah would never, lose a sight of what was happening. There is a wisdom behind all of these things, even though we don't know these things. I don't know, it's not mine. These are the, is it somebody's? No. Samahuna. Allahumma salli wa sallam ala Sayyidina Muhammad, Sayyidina Muhammad. So being able to be grateful to Allah and understand that He is in control, and you have to kind of remind yourself this. That's the state when you start to submit. You submit to Allah as a true Muslim, and you say, okay, Allah, I don't know why all of these things are happening in the world, but I know that there's a plan behind it. And then it's up to us as the ummah to respond. And you start, if you try to change something, as the Prophet said, let me try to change it. But if you can't change it, then at least speak about it. And if you can't do anything, just in your heart at least. And that's the lowest level of iman, meaning that the baseline, the foundation, should be dua and just turning to Allah all the time. And don't think that your du'as won't help. We believe that dua is a weapon. It's a weapon of the believer. You have to believe it inside. If you truly believe it, that's just the baseline, and then you can do things on top. You can try to educate others, raise awareness. If you can't even go out further and do something, go to the protests or go do actions, charities, things that could benefit. These are all things that you could try to do, so that you have some way to use that energy. Otherwise, if you don't use that energy in a healthy way, then it just stays inside, and you start getting really depressed. And you don't go out, as Sheikh Mohamad was saying, that people get engaged in this, and then they can't even go out anymore. They're just depressed all the time, and that doesn't help any of us. It doesn't help the ummah or your family or the community if you're so isolated like that, because you're just overwhelmed with the emotions. It's okay to have these emotions of sadness, and as you see these images, it's so powerful, and it's okay. It's okay. You have to acknowledge that too. That, even when the Prophet ﷺ, when he lost his son Ibrahim, and it's a well-known incident where he was holding the baby Ibrahim, and he was actually in his kafan. He was already, wrapped up for burial. And it reminds me of those images in Palestine where they're holding their babies all wrapped up already, and the Prophet ﷺ was holding Ibrahim, and then he smelled him. He smelled the baby, because the baby always has a special smell, So his last time that he was going to hold this baby before it would be buried, he's holding it. And his eyes start welling up with tears. And one of the Sahaba said, "Wa anta ya Rasulullah? Even you, ya Rasulullah? Why would you, you're the messenger of God. Why are you sitting in this sadness, crying about this?" They thought maybe it was about, like, if you have strong iman, you should always be, uplifted and happy all the time. But that's not human. And the Prophet ﷺ, although he was khayr khalqillah, he was the best of all creations, but he was also a human. So he had all the human reactions as well. And the Prophet ﷺ says that it's the eyes that will well up with tears. That's normal. It's the only thing is that we don't say anything that would displease Allah. وَإِنَّا لِفِرَائِقَ يَا إِبْرَاهِيمَ لَمَحْزُونُونَ. And so he said, when he lost Ibrahim, he said, Ibrahim, with your iftiraq, when you left us, it was very difficult, and we were afflicted with sadness. So even the Prophet ﷺ, the best of all of us, he had a broken heart in that moment, and he felt the tears and he felt the sadness. So it's a normal reaction for any of us to be struggling with these emotions when we're facing all of these the suffering and these calamities that are around us. But then we have to always remind ourselves, this is the dunya. This is the normal state of this world. Imam al-Haddad, one of the great scholars of Hadramaut in Yemen, he says, "Ad-dunya la rahata fiha." This dunya, this world, there is no rest. There's nothing that you just sit back and have like a nice, you can have temporary moments, of course, but they're all temporary. You can have a vacation and enjoy it, but when you get back, you'll still realize it was fleeting. Everything is fleeting. And the only things that are lasting are the things that are linked to the akhirah. If you have a good intention, suddenly it has something not meaning in just this world. It goes beyond this world. Even when you just eat some food, if you just eat some food to sustain your body, then it just stays here in this world. But if you say Bismillah and you ask Allah for forgiveness and you ask Allah for thanks for this food, and it becomes a way to then connect it to the akhirah, then that meal suddenly becomes more than just this meal. It becomes ibadah, it becomes a connection, thanking Allah. It becomes something much more than that. So my advice, when we're in the electronic world, the digital world, and most of us were spending more time in the digital world. One is we have to remember that it's a dangerous place. There's a lot of misinformation, and unfortunately, there's a lot of just things that will hurt your soul when you watch some of these things. So you have to make sure that it's limited. You have a good intention when you're doing it. and that you have other ways to use your energy, so you're not just sitting there being preoccupied with these things. Make sure you go out in the world and do things that are beneficial to you, your family, your community, the ummah in general. These are all ways so you can take some of that energy and use it in a healthy channel and use it in the world. I don't know, do you normally want to open it up and we just have comments and questions? I'm happy to just, interact with you all, and I really appreciate the time to be here with you. So, yeah. Yeah. تفضلي. Go ahead, sister.
I was a couple of weeks ago. I was watching this video on YouTube on a famous Muslim YouTuber, and usually talks against dawah to people. And one of the people that called in, I guess, was somebody that regularly watched this channel. Was an Israeli, and he admitted to committing a lot of heinous crimes, a lot of disgusting things. And by the end of the show, during the talk, the show was just Islam. By the end, he showed a lot of red, and he became Muslim. He took his shahada.
Wow.
He took his shahada at the end. So it was a big surprise, to everyone that he took the shahada. And my question is, as much as I was happy to hear the shahada, after hearing the things that he did do, where do we stand? Where does this person stand in front of Allah? Is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala going to forgive him for all the crimes that he committed? Will he be, do we show mercy? Do we forgive? Or do we hold him accountable? Where do we stand? Where does he stand in front of Allah?
That's a great question. Yeah, I mean, so there are many stories actually from the times of the Prophet ﷺ and the Sahaba of people who did a lot of bad things and killed people, murdered, and caused all kinds of, corruption in the world. But they eventually found their way to Islam, and in that moment they repented. And so, of course, when you become a Muslim, you say the Shahadatain, you're fresh. You've got a whole new clean slate, I think now the question, will Allah forgive some of these things or not? That's between Allah and the servant, like we wouldn't know either way. We don't assume. We just understand that we can't hate someone who at least turned to Islam, eventually even became Muslim. I think it's difficult because we're trying to look at the past, but we're also have to understand that they were also part of the qadr of Allah, right? Allah designed this whole cone, this whole existence. So if you feel that Allah made a mistake, which hasha, Allah would never do that, then we would have to assume and say, okay, then maybe if I don't fully understand, by the way, maybe I just can't figure it. I can't figure it out, I know that, I think it was Ibn al-Yaman, the Sahabi, Sheikh Mohamad, maybe you can remind me, in Uhud, when there were the people, the arrows and stuff that were sent, and one of the Sahaba, his father, went down and was accidentally killed by the Muslims, and he said, "Yaghfirakum Allah, lakinnahu abi." I forgive you, but he was my father. Like there's certain emotions I can't ignore that. I know theologically you can be forgiven. Emotionally, I'm struggling, and that's okay, to admit it. But we just have to understand that Allah has a plan for these things. We don't know. I mean, it is very interesting to see how many people have been now learning and getting close to, and even taking the Shahada just in these last few months. And I don't know if what that means. What does that mean? Like, there's such a tragic thing happening in Palestine. It's hard to think there could be something good coming out of this. But as a believer, we have to trust that Allah must have a plan. And in that, who knows how many people have taken the Shahada in these few months, learned about Islam. There's some people who would say that just by looking at the response of the Palestinian, it forced them to go read the Quran for the first time in their life. So there's could be hidden things in this, the hidden blessings that are there. But in the end, we can't with certainty say, did Allah forgive this or that? That's between Allah on the day of judgment. What will happen? But it's a very good thoughtful question. And the thing I like about that question is it engages the reflection. Thank you.
By the way, the
Islam is clear. He repented and he converted to Islam. So
Yeah.
whatever behind this wife,
Yeah,
is like born again.
exactly. Yeah,
Clean.
yeah, mashallah, like a baby.
I've seen this episode on YouTube. He repented and he was sorry and for what he had done by killing the
Yeah.
I just have a few comments, just bear with me. This strategy and this narrative that is being used on Palestine and the Palestinian people is nothing new. It was invented, it was used in Nazi Germany by Joseph Goebbels. It dehumanizes the person or the people first. It stigmatizes them. It allows for society to see them as less than human.
Right.
You will hear it in the propaganda. It creates a massive gnosis, whereby if you hear the propaganda, they'll repeat things in 3s and 6s, like, they're animals, they're animals. They'll keep repeating it because the number 3 allows it to be embedded into your consciousness. This strategy was borrowed from the English. And this is how they were able to colonize India and Africa and this is what they did to African Americans. This strategy says to you that, excuse me, if I dehumanize you, then I can come in and do any kind of destruction to you. The images are very important. And especially the sounds. A lot of times you'll notice you'll hear sirens and then they will run a story. It's made to get your attention. It's
Yeah.
very much like a slot machine or gambling or cocaine. It taps into your dopamine levels and your epinephrine levels, and it gets your heart rate going. That is the intention, because if I can unplug you from your life and plug you into fear, scare tactics, harm, hurt, it allows me to disconnect from a regular human being. I don't see you anymore. I'm only living in my emotions. From there, that's when they're able to plug in the images of any and all types of slaughter, because now you're living in your emotions. That's why the images are so important. And that's why they cut it off on Facebook and Twitter and things of that nature, and only show you what they want you to see. Because now I've got you in a position where you're only living in your anxiety. And so I can imprint anything to you, and it makes people depressed. It gives them anxiety. It makes them scared, frustrated, tired, depressed, you name it. Those are the images that's used by Israel. And it's nothing new. Again, it's been used, they borrowed that strategy from the English. The more important thing is that we have our du'as. We have our prayers. More important than images is the beginning, there was the word. The fact that we can go and pray, just the shaking of beads on camera gets somebody attention. It breaks that connection. It sort of severs that tie. The more you can say dua online, this is why so many people are turning to Islam. The more you can say your duas, is the more you break up that static. The more you can show and humanize Muslims. You see families, you see dinners, you see prayers, you see cleanliness. The more it starts to break up the static and push back in the, not just in cyberspace, but in the minds of people subconsciously. And when they're showing those images, make dua and inject good images. See Palestine as being completely built up. See victory. See, Islam conquering the world. See these images as they are projecting those images and make your prayer beads. It is more potent, and it plugs in and it grips more in the brain, in the frontal cortex, than the images that are being thrown at you. And it doesn't allow their images and their propaganda to lay ground in your mind and in your life.
Yes, yeah. No, thank you. You should be giving the talk here, mashallah. That's it. It's exactly there. I mean, even just the most like silly, things that we get preoccupied with, shows and movie. There's all that. There's a very addictive nature about it because it does activate the dopamine system and all of your responses to these kind of the pleasure parts of your brain. So even aside of just what we're seeing, the political things, but even just the simple like what we'd say that the lighthearted stuff, it can also be very addictive, and people get locked in for that for a long time. It's so powerful. So no, thank you for that comment and that awareness. I do it makes me also think about who are our teachers. Who are our teachers? We don't take the lessons of what our enemies are doing to us. We don't use those same tactics because they're not our teachers. So if I feel that if as an ummah, if we trust in this, we trust in Allah, and we have sidq, sincere, sincerity in our heart with good intentions, then Allah will, open up the world to us in any way that happens. The Prophet ﷺ had Yawm al-Fath. He conquered Mecca, and when he returned, there was no bloodshed. He could have, some of the Ansar, some of the Shabab, the young guys on the day of the conquest, Yawm al-Fath, when they entered to Mecca, they said, Al-Yawm Yawm Malhama. They said, today we're going to slaughter these people. Because they thought they're going back to fight the Quraysh, they're going to take over Mecca and go in, and the Prophet ﷺ, he had to, calm them down. He said, Bal al-yawm yawm marhama. Today is the day of mercy. And when he entered Mecca, they said that his beard was this down onto his chest in humility. Just head down, entered into Mecca as the conqueror, but with no bloodshed. Didn't kill all the people that were his enemies, people that were, just killing Muslims left and right. He pardoned all of them and entered in Mecca. But that iman in the whole community of the ummah was different, And if the Muslims, whenever we stray away from that, then we get into all these calamities and things. And then it has to, then it renews. Allah always has, tajdeed, with every generation. And then when Salah ad-Din Ibn Ayyubi, when he comes into Palestine, when he comes into Jerusalem, does he slaughter people? No. Complete humility. These are not our teachers. He says, they say, why would you come in? The Crusaders just 100 years ago slaughtered all these Muslims and Jews and people all around. And Salah ad-Din is like, those are not our teachers. This is for us as Muslims, even at this day, what's happening to us and our ummah. the people that are slaughtering our people and putting up all of these propaganda and all of these things, they're not our teachers. We don't have to come back with them with the same vengeance and anger and hatred that they put on the world. We don't have to reflect it. We already have our own source, which is the light of our beloved Prophet Muhammad and all of his teachings and how he conducted, and then all of the righteous people in our history. So this is something to consider as like, again, going back to my original point of where does our knowledge come from, and is it connected to the truthful sources? Sorry. Does someone have the mic?
Assalamu alaikum. If one has an addiction, like watching YouTube or whatever, how does one break it and like get rid of that habit?
Yeah, that's a great question. If you get an addiction, then you have to go with what we call a detox. You have to get away from the thing that's you're addicted to. This is for any addict, whether it's alcohol, cigarettes, anything. You have to have a detox time where you stop it. Basically, you have to step away from it. Take time. I think hopefully a lot of us during Ramadan, we try to turn off some of our accounts, so we don't have to log in to everything all the time. You can kind of try to reduce it, get that detox, and understand that just you have to look at your day-to-day life. How much is being affected because I'm spending so much time on these screens? And this is, like I said, for us as adults, even for our children, in general, we have to limit. Basically, there's no other way, because it's so addictive. It's so dangerous. You have to assume that if I just open it, I'm going to be susceptible, at least. That's why I need to have some boundaries about it. And then you have to fill that with something else that's meaningful, positive, beneficial. So you might have to go and do something else. Could be just something physical. Go take a walk, or go see nature, or do something that will benefit your health, in another way, so that, or go and seek beneficial knowledge in that moment, and try to fill in that time as much as you can. If you're just sitting and you don't have anything to do and you're not well focused and engaged, then unfortunately you will go back to whatever it is you're addicted to. That's the nature of, if you're just sitting there waiting. So you have to kind of fill in these other positive things so that your whole time is regimented so that you have time and schedule of what you're going to do these things. So then by the end of the day, you're tired anyways, and you go to bed, and this is the other problem, is people stay up all night, on these things too. And so then it messes with your sleep, and sleep is very important as well in your mental health and well-being.
I just have one last thing to say. What you said about the jiu-jitsu and then having teachers was so beautiful, because we have such a great lineage in Islam. And I'm going to just bring this back to the power of our du'as and our prayers. On the other side, if we're feeling anxiety and fear, on the other side, say Christians, they don't pray as much. And so their fear and their anxiety is even amplified. And so they may turn to patriotism or whatever it may be. But throughout this horrific tragedy, we've been handed an exceptionally powerful gift and tool, the power of our du'as. Can you imagine a world of Muslims on the first day of Ramadan doing Ayatul Kursi in synchronicity, and doing that on YouTube? And what a message that's going to send, not just to the world, but to the people of Palestine. We have our du'as that, again, in threes and in sixes, imprint in the brain. And not only does it break up the algorithms, but it really brings us together as an ummah. The power of the word is more powerful than that of an image. So I just want to say that.
Yeah, Jazakumullah khair. So,
I want to ask a question actually because this is one of the things that I deal a lot with people. So now, in your opinion, what do you think? Sometimes a lot of people they think that I need to expose myself to the videos and images, and they feel like this is a way how I can share the Palestinians' griefs. And on other hand, they feel like if I don't watch the videos, I don't see these pictures, as if I'm distant myself from their atrocity and their adversity. And in the time that when they watch these videos and these images, it's really, as you mentioned, like some people they really been affected by anxiety. People they don't sleep. I've received sometimes calls the middle of the night. They're saying we can't sleep. We know all the images in our mind, and they feel like if I don't do this, as if I'm ignoring what's going on to the Palestinian. And when they expose themselves to this, also they have a negative reaction. What do you yani,
I mean,
what's your advice?
as the Prophet ﷺ said that, it's like a jasad, the ummah, it's like a body, and if some part of the heart of our body is, ailing, has some illness or some pain, the whole body will be affected, right? And we are all, as Muslims, we are being affected by this. If I go to like any other, channels in other countries like Indonesia and Africa and different parts of Europe and Muslims anywhere, they're all affected by this. It's very difficult to find a Muslim who's not affected. All Muslims right now, we're all having some pain, so we're having this pain. Do you need more images to feel it? That's the question. Most of us were already in that state of pain, and we're feeling the pain of our brothers and sisters in Palestine. Now, I feel like for many of us, the images, it's useful because you do have ghafla. You can forget and get into your kind of day-to-day life, and you kind of just stay on very superficial things, and then you get hit by one of these images, and suddenly the reality comes back. So sometimes that can be helpful. It can be helpful at times. But again, you have to have boundaries, and you have to have regimented ways, and you have good intentions. What's your intention at that moment? Okay, I'm about to, when you get the post and it says like, do you want to watch this? Yes or no? Like, this is a sensitive video. Do you want to watch it? Yes or no? It gives you that little thing. So that in that moment, I would say, okay, take a little breath, make an intention. What's your niyyah at that moment? If it is because I want to just share that pain and I want to maybe spread awareness and make some du'as, okay, then I'll say Bismillah, I'll watch that video. Okay, good. Now I did it. But if you're stuck and you're overexposed, then you're not helping the situation. The pain doesn't get less, with more, images, and you get more and more stressed, anxiety and depression. And then in that time, you could have used it for dua. You could have do it, use that energy in a positive way instead of just sitting there, soaking in these images and the videos too much. So you have to have some way of thinking about it with an intention when you're getting into it. Otherwise, you're just using it as another way to sort of soothe, or it's a pattern. You're just going into the pattern because it's familiar to you, but it's not necessarily beneficial to you in that moment.
Salam. My question is there like a psychology studies on people who because I was listening to the sister, and I also believe that words have power, right? So like if somebody says I'm being oppressed compared to somebody that says I'm not oppressed, is there like a difference in how they make decisions?
Oh yeah. So there's a whole research on being able to, if you have a spiritual connection, then you have a way to process this fleeting world. Otherwise, it's very difficult. If you look at this world and you don't have any spiritual, let's say you have no sense of al-akhirah, the unseen world, al-ghaib and these things, and you just think everything is right here, the physical reality here. It's a very difficult world to go through, and I see this in my patients, who, if they don't have any spiritual understanding, they're always in this just wretched state, because they're realizing this is it. Especially if they get later in their life and they have illnesses, chronic illness, and you're suffering, and you look at your health and you see that people are dying, and you're like, this is it. This is the whole existence. It becomes very wretched and kind of sad, and you have no way out. Whereas the people that have a spiritual understanding, they have a way to cope, and they have a way to put it in their mind in a way that's not wretched. So you can have you can speak these words to yourself about, I'll give you an example. So I use this a lot. There's a concept in Islam, it's called husnul dhan. Husnul dhan billah. I have a good opinion of Allah, that whatever Allah is doing in life, He must have some reason for it. There's a hikmah. That's husnul dhan billah. And so if you have husnul dhan billah, you believe that God is looking out for you. He is planning things for you, for your benefit. Even the sad things that you go through life, He is planning it in a way so that it will come out, and you'll realize years later, oh, why did I go through that? And then you realize years later, oh, that's why, certain gifts will come later. And so that's husnul dhan. If you don't have if you have, su'ud dhan billah, wali'ayadhu billah, that means you think that God is against you. He's always trying to, mess you up. He's always trying to give you disappointment in life. And so that's how you see the world. And so Allah says, ana 'inda dhanni bi, whatever ana 'inda dhanni 'abdi bi, whatever my servant has an opinion of me, that's how I will. That's how I view the world. So I have two patients, and I'll go to the first patient, and this person has this su'ud dhan, this bad opinion about the whole universe is all bad. And so I'm in the nursing facility, and they had a major surgery. They have maybe lost one of their limbs. They can't function anymore. They need a lot of medication. And they're sitting there, and I say, hey, how are you doing today, Mr. So-and-so? And he says, oh, I'm terrible. Look at this. I'm just sitting in this hospital bed. I can't do anything. I can't even go to the bathrooms. I need a nurse to come take me to the bathroom. Sitting here, they come and they bring me this boring food, and I have to sit here, this horrible place, and eat this food. And then, nobody sees me or visits me. There's this one nephew of mine who comes only once a month just to say hi to me, and then he leaves. This is a wretched life. Then I'll go literally to the next bed, another patient who has almost the same diagnosis, the same functional limitations, can't do things on his own, completely, dependent on the nurses. And I say, how are you, sir? How are you doing today? But this person has a totally different view. He's spoken it in his way of how he looks at the world. And he says, you know what? Oh, it's great. I'm blessed. Look, there's a good day outside. I can see the window. And, sometimes I have to go to the bathroom, but you know what? There's a nurse. She helps me to get to the bathroom. And can you believe it? Every meal, they come and bring me on a tray, the food. They put it to me on the bed. And can you believe it? Once a month, my nephew comes and he sees me and hangs out with me. I'm blessed. And I'm like, these two people have the exact same circumstance, but they have totally different spiritual understandings of that situation. And so that's why and usually the people that have that spiritual contention, they usually have better outcomes, in terms of recovery, the ability to get back to their functions, even just health in general. They usually have better outcomes because they have a more positive way to look spirituality, and that. Yeah, exactly. One has more doubt, like, is God really going to help me or not? If you don't, if you believe that, then that's how Allah will be for you. That's your worldview. But if you have a worldview that no, Allah is always keeping in my mind, He's helping me, He's supporting me in some way, I don't know exactly yet, then you will see that manifested in your life.
Jazakallah khair,
Yeah,
Dr.
come on.
Mahmoud. We can have, inshallah, two more questions. We don't want to keep you all late. Inshallah, mashallah, time goes so fast, alhamdulillah. We can have one question from the sisters and one question from the brothers. I think, who was raising his hand? Hey.
Assalamu alaikum. So I guess real quick, I just have one question. So one of my concerns with like not being on social media right now is if I don't like engage with the content, not that it won't make me feel anything, but that it'll start to like disappear from like what's being talked about. And so, because one day or a couple of days I took a cleanse, or I wasn't on there, and then I went back on. I felt like my feed was kind of like back to normal, and I like panicked. So I like interacted a lot with a lot of the videos just to keep it
Catch up.
To catch up.
Yeah.
Yes, that was my one thing. And then I just wanted to make like one suggestion about like when you're seeing this and you're feeling very like lonely or stressed. Sometimes if you go on there, there's a lot of like resources or flyers about like events or protests or community events. So I think it's like good to like find and gather with like-minded people who are like experiencing the same thing. Like here, you know, you get like the spiritual like healing, but when you're at protests, you get to see like, you know, a lot of the action being done, or even going to like cultural events and stuff, especially when they're trying to completely like erase an entire culture and people engaging with that. So I think not taking yourself out of it, but like engaging in like community and people who share your same goals and like beliefs can help you feel like less alone.
Jazakumullah khair. Yeah, thank you for that. I agree completely. Like, those are positive ways to use that energy, you know. Engaging with people who are like-minded, you know, you can do things to kind of, again, help with the awareness, or like you said, the activist part of it. I think if you can merge the spiritual and the activism, that's the most, like, that's the highest level to get to, you know. So the Prophet ﷺ, on the night before Badr, the battle of Badr, he spent all night in dua, and qiyam al-layl, and so the battle, of course, was there. All they came to fight, but imagine all the spiritual prep before that. I tell the young, the shabab, you're going to the protests, the mudaharats or something. Great, go, but it would be amazing that the night before, get up and have some tahajjud before you go to that protest, and then you'll merge the spiritual part and the activist together. And then you mentioned about what was the first thing you were saying about the? Oh no, you said when you were you took a little cleanse. You took a cleanse and you set, but then when you came back, you almost felt like you had to catch up with all the other images, right? You were saying. Oh yeah, because you didn't engage with it. Yeah. Yeah.
So you only like gear towards your own group of people who already know.
Yeah, that's true. And the more that you engage with a certain content, then they'll give you more similar ones like that. So, like, I think it's good to have these cleanses and step back, because especially you're still going to hear voices here and there. You'll go to the masjid, you might hear here and there, you talk to your other friends and family. Of course, you're going to hear still some of the news, you know, not directly, but indirectly. And so you'll still be connected. And of course, your heart will always still be connected to the people who are suffering. And we say this in our du'as and the qunut, you know, about that Allah, you know, grant victory and give help to those who are suffering. So these are ways where you can still be connected, even if you're not engaged with the imagery.
Jazakallah khair. We have one more question from brother at the back. Yes. Go.
You have to speak closely. There's been a lot of mention in the past talk of people who process adversary life experiences differently. There are people who will trust God that He has a plan for them and that the bad thing that happened will result in something good later. And there are people who blame Allah for the bad thing that happened as if
Right.
He's trying to hurt them.
Yeah.
I don't see a lot of sympathy for those types of people. It's almost as if they're told that they need to change how they think. I don't think it's very productive, because at the core, deep down level, they don't trust God. And there could be a lot of reasons for that, but it's not something that they can change. And like I said, it's not very productive, because especially if they're not someone who can reach out to other people, or someone who even has the willpower or has the courage to make themselves vulnerable like that, they're just going to keep making the same mistake over and over and again, which kind of contradicts the whole statement that Allah is the most merciful, will help everyone, because this person fundamentally doesn't trust God for whatever reason. Maybe it had to do with child trauma. It's not them. They're not intentionally choosing not to trust God, but they're going to keep hurting themselves because they don't. And they don't know why. They're not going to learn that they just don't trust God.
Yeah.
So I think that needs to be changed. And that's pretty much all I had to say.
Right.
I'm not sure what your
no.
response to that is, but that's what I think.
No, thank you for sharing that, brother. Thank you. MashaAllah. Yes, and forgive me if I forgot to mention about the sense of empathy. You know, empathy is a huge thing that we as a community need to always encourage, because there are people who may be struggling with, you know, these thought processes and these very negative thought processes that they can't seem to get out of. There are areas when you choose certain things in life, and there are other times where you're just stuck in a pattern, you know, and so you go back to the pattern that's familiar. So if it's kind of self-harming, you know, it's a little bit, you know, brings yourself down, but you're used to it, became your pattern, then that's something that, you know, unfortunately just becomes a repetitive thing. So we need ways to break those cycles. One of the ways is that, you know, we should reach out and engage people. If you know someone is maybe struggling with this, I know, you know, this is just the reality. A lot of young Muslims, unfortunately, they leave the deen, and some of them leave all belief, you know, even just the sense of God. And it's very sad. There should be a sense of empathy in your heart that, you know, even the Prophet ﷺ, he stood up when, you know, when there was a Jewish man, his janazah came by, and the Prophet ﷺ stand up. He said, this was a soul that, you know, slipped out of my fingers. Maybe I could have given da'wah to that person. You know, so this is a sense of like, even when people are in a negative pattern, we should still hope them to eventually get out of that. That should be our goal in our heart. Even if we can't, then at least make dua for that person. You know, we've talked about the power of the dua, so even help the people that are struggling within our community. I know a number of young guys, you know, I was born and raised here in California my whole life, and some of my friends have left the deen. They don't believe in anymore. And there's one, I've always was really close to him, but anytime somebody would come to talk to him, it becomes an argument and becomes like this conflict and a debate. You know, I don't believe in it. Do you believe in it? Why do you believe in this? And it becomes this very, you know, contentious, you know, time. It's not fun. And most of the people that I notice who are, they espouse that they're atheist, they actually do believe in God, but they're angry at God. They're like, why didn't you give me, you know, this type of life? And instead I ended up like this. So all of the way that they speak about it, there's a hatefulness about just the idea of God. So one of my friends, what I do is I just go hang there and talk with him. We'll go places, you know, go have a meal together. Once you become a mulhid, you know, you become a apostate, it's very difficult. You don't have a community anymore. So sometimes he misses just, you know, the food and sitting with some of the friends and having that community feeling. It has not, you know, he's still missing that. So I'll go visit him and we'll go, hey, let's go visit this one uncle, you know, and, you know, he's just sitting alone, and I make him along, you know, with me, and he's not going to say bad things to the uncle. So he's just there, but he wants there because he knows there's going to be, you know, just some love around that he's been missing, you know? And so that's been my strategy, is just, we don't talk about the deen, we don't talk about theology, I just try to have good character with the person and see how that does. And then sometimes he'll, you know, even join in the prayer. I even ask him, like, you know, are you gonna, you don't have to pray, but it's Asr, I'm gonna pray. He'll say, oh, I'll pray with you, you know, and maybe, I don't know if he believes in it or not, but at least he's doing it in that moment, you know. And these are things that we kind of have to just approximate, you know, with time and exposure. But you should always still have that sense of empathy, because at any moment, Iman could be taken from your heart. It's not guaranteed. Like, you think I'm going to be always a Muslim, but you have to ask Allah for that. You know, Allah, you guided me. Please keep me on the straight path. You know, we say that in the Fatiha, every prayer. Keep us on the, you know, the mustaqim, you know, on the straight path. And so we have to be very humble about your own Islam, because you may or not be, you know, with all of these people that are becoming Muslim, you know, you see them on TikTok and Instagram, amazing people. They've never even read the Quran and they've become Muslim because of just, you know, learning about and seeing the people in Palestine. And I heard that, you know, last year I heard Imam Zaid, you know, Imam Zaid Shakar, he said he believes that there will be mass conversion to Islam, similar to when you know, the nation of Islam, most of the population, they converted to Sunni Islam when the Warith Deen community. So like overnight, all these Muslims, you know, became, you know, part of the community. And he believes that in these coming years, these next coming years, there's going to be mass people who are just going to, they're going to, you know, they're going to be attracted to Islam. It has the truth. Of course, people will believe in it, and it will spread. And Islam will be fine. But you and I, we may not be in it. We don't know. Allah, He can take a whole group of people and replace them with a whole nother group of people, and those people love Him. These new group of people, they love Allah. So it's we have to always be humble and realize Islam is going to be fine, but whether or not I'm part of that Islam, I don't know. I have to be humble about that and constantly turn to Allah. And that's another way to keep you connected to the divine. وَالْعَفْوُ مِنْكُمْ. Forgive me, and I appreciate again the time to be with you all. And maybe I'm gonna
MashaAllah. Jazakallah khairan for the last parting advice was very good as well,
Yes,
MashaAllah. Jazakallah khairan. We thank Dr. Saab for coming in to our masjid and giving us his time and his knowledge. And we invite him to keep coming, inshallah, and keep benefiting our community with this. And every Friday night, alhamdulillah, we have programs like this. So we encourage everyone to come every Friday night, inshallah, and take part in the programs, inshallah. Jazakallah khairan. Subhanallah wa bihamdi. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Jazakallah khairan.